and I am the Director of Homegrown. And I'm joined today by my teammate, Karen Tylick, our Program Manager, and I'm so thankful for all of her work to get this event organized. We are so pleased to be partnering with the Ounce and are so thankful to Margie Wallen for her contributions to today's event. And we're also partnering with the Early Education Achievement Consultants, Carol Kientz and Kathy Colfer, who are going to be leading our presentation today. And again, we're so thankful for their contributions and really their willingness to work under a very tight timeline. So thank you, ladies. We're excited for the presentation today. Shortly, I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Adrienne Briggs, a high-quality family childcare provider in Philadelphia, who currently provides Head Start services in her family childcare home. Adrienne is also an advisor to Homegrown. But before I do that, I just want to share a couple of thoughts on why Homegrown is hosting this event and a series of supports for both family childcare networks who want to become early Head Start childcare partnerships and for early Head Start childcare partnership grantees who want to include home-based care in their programs. Homegrown is really committed to improving the quality of home-based care and increasing access. And we really come to this work from a recognition that priority communities we care deeply about are receiving services in home-based care. In particular, children of low income, infants and toddlers, Black and Latinx families, children with special needs, those in rural communities, and those whose parents work non-traditional hours. We also believe that the Head Start model that combines high quality services with effective financing and comprehensive supports is really important for this community. There are currently about 10,000 children in the family childcare model in Head Start, and it's our goal to see that number increase. So we're really excited about your willingness to participate with us today. We've designed this webinar and a series of webinars and peer calls alongside various other resources, and really want to hear from you throughout this process as to how we can support your journey to either become a grantee or to include home-based family childcare providers in your grant. So we have a lot of really detailed information to share today. And I'm not going to take too much more time. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to Adrienne to just share and kind of open our conversation and ground our conversation in the experience of a provider serving families in Head Start and what it's meant for her as a high-quality family child care provider. Thank you so much, Adrienne, for joining us today.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrienne Briggs from Little Bits Family Child Care Home. I've been a partner of Head Start for the past 6 years. Head Start has meant a greater level of professionalism, and it has taught me how to offer more intentional teaching experiences and enhance my parent engagement. It's been important because we're partnering with Head Start. It has changed my program by enhancing my preschool knowledge and turning my focus more so into the academics of preschool and kindergarten readiness. I used to use Mother Goose curriculum through Head Start after switched to creative curriculum. And I also used to use, Ounce and work sampling. And now I use teaching strategies. And with these two programs, with the enhancement of these two programs, they are teaching more, they're focused mostly on the social, emotional portion of the child, literacy, math, science, technology, the physical, language, cognitive. So it's the whole child and cramps the whole child. So it has made my program even a higher quality than what I was already doing. And it's more of a partnership. So I'm not alone doing this now. I have this as a partnership, have received plenty of support from Head Start, and it has just made my program better. So I've loved it.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. I know it's nap time in your program today, and we just really appreciate you taking a few minutes to share with us sort of how Head Start has improved kind of the rigor of your curriculum, the enhanced use of assessment tools, and I really appreciate sort of the partnership aspect, because that's a really important part of what participating in Head Start is. So really thankful to you, Adrian. And sort of as I turn it over to Kathy and Carol for our discussion today, you know, we invited Adrian to share her experience today with Head Start, because really it's such an important kind of reflection on kind of how Head Start can improve quality and support for home-based childcare, for family childcare and the children in that setting. Today, our conversation is really going to look at a subset of the Head Start program, which is the Early Head Start Childcare Partnership, and opportunities to connect with family childcare to serve infants and toddlers. But many of those same opportunities in terms of comprehensive services, improved curriculum, and kind of quality rigor are present in this one as well. So thank you so much, Adrian. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol and Kathy to lead us through our discussion today.
Well, thank you, Natalie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathy Kolfer. I am a retired 20-year director of Child Care, Head Start, Early Head Start, and the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships, all of which supported our community family child care providers. So before I begin, I'd like to give a great big shout out and thank you to Homegrown for acknowledging the importance of building systems and services to support our family child care providers. Secondly, I'd like to thank all of you for your interest in this federal opportunity. And again, as Natalie said, it's called Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships. The grant's overarching purpose is to increase the supply of quality childcare for low-income children, 6 weeks to school age 4, and to really help connect their families to resources needed to improve family outcomes. It is built on the premise that respectful, trusting relationships among community providers and Head Start systems will lead to quality improvements in systems and services for all children. This webinar has really been developed to support programs who are not currently Head Start grantees, meaning you don't have a Head Start grant, but who are very interested in becoming one or who are interested in partnering with one. I also understand that we have some family childcare providers joining us today, so welcome. We are thrilled that you are joining us to learn more about this partnership grant. So hopefully we'll provide you with some useful information and foster your interest in pursuing this opportunity. So can I have the next slide, please? The topics that we're going to cover today in this presentation are: number one, the importance of family child care, the history and development of these grants, a couple of examples of what a child care network could look like. And I want to say I'm using the term network very broadly. It's often called other names like hubs or consortium, but for today, I'm just going to use, for simplicity, the term network. And we'll go over a couple of examples in a minute. And last but not least, this presentation is designed to familiarize you with the grant application and the Head Start management systems. So we really do have a lot of ground to cover in a very short period of time. So there'll be slides throughout this presentation that we'll just skim over. Some we may only have a couple points that we want to make about the information on the slide. We're really hoping to hit the high points today and give you a sense of the expectations of the grant and program implementation. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat box. If we don't get to respond during the webinar, we'll either respond in writing or discuss the topic at a scheduled technical assistance call. So, but right now I'd like to take a poll. You'll see a poll appear on your screen. And my first question to the audience is, and this is using a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being least, 5 being most, where would you rate your current knowledge of the expectations contained in the Head Start performance standards? Where do you feel you are on that 1 to 5 scale? Are they voting? Okay. I just couldn't see it. Oh, so it looks like we go from the 1 to the 5, which is really, really good. Because can um, great. So we're hoping, well, we're hoping, we know. The good news is, can I have the next slide, please? The good news is that wherever you placed yourself on this scale, there's a vast amount of resources available for organizations interested in submitting a grant. And some of the examples are here. There's a Head Start online training called Head Start A to Z. Homegrown has developed, in conjunction with the OUNCE, an amazing resource library, as well as a bank of experienced grant writers to assist you with your application. They're planning technical assistance calls. And additionally, you will find the blue links throughout this presentation that correspond to the information that's on the slide. So those slides will take you to some really helpful resources. Once you've been awarded a grant, there's extensive Head Start training and its technical assistance support, as well as regional offices and independent contractors ready to assist you with program implementation. And remember, you learn a lot along the way. Often implementation will look very different than what is explained in the application. So don't worry, there was always flexibility after the award. You don't have to have everything perfect to submit the grant. So I know Homegrown is really hoping that, as Natalie said, organizations submitting applications become really excited about family-focused plans, family childcare focused plans. In fact, they will be hosting a webinar in the near future where you'll hear from programs with exemplary practices. If you're planning on submitting an application, it will be a webinar you really don't want to miss. Go ahead, the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this grant supports licensed childcare standing in good standing with the state licensing regulations. That's whether it's center-based or childcare. However, or family childcare, excuse me. However, for the first time, the grant focuses on the importance of childcare networks and encourages our communities and our partners to band together to increase access to resources and administrative efficiencies for family childcare providers. What the federal government has really recognized by doing this is that the family childcare field right now is in peril and needs some assistance to support a downward trend in the number of providers. Now, according to a survey done recently by the Center on Early Childhood Quality, between the years of 2005 and 2017, there's been a 52% decrease in family child care homes, and that means providers who are working alone without other staff. The decrease in number of providers represents a 40% decrease in enrollment opportunities for children, as well as a 51% decrease in the participation in the Child Care Development Fund. And we refer to that fund as CCDF. It really is a fund that assists low-income families who are working and are going to school. It helps them pay for childcare. Often this is referred to as a childcare voucher or a childcare subsidy. So really, it's really easy to imagine why low-income families are struggling to find quality, affordable childcare. Without expansion, many will not be able to re-enter or even enter the workforce. I think we've witnessed this in real time over the past few months, with many top-level and community leaders finally understanding how childcare is a component of economic health. Family childcare is an essential service for our families. So it's really encouraging to me that the federal government is elevating the importance of family childcare and is really thinking about innovative approaches to building the supply and quality of services, improving provider compensation, and workforce supports for families. So next slide, please. We on next slide. Can we go one more? Oh. Well, I think we missed one about the benefits of family childcare, but I'm going to just jump in here. We could probably spend the next hour just talking about the benefits of family childcare to children, to families in our communities. Family childcare providers form close one-on-one relationships with each child. The warm, calm, well, maybe I should say sometimes calm, home-like environments are wonderful for all children, but particularly important for infants and toddlers and 3-year-olds who need the supportive bonds with a primary caregiver that is ever present in family childcare. Family childcare providers really do become part of a child's extended family. Parents get to know them personally, they build strong relationships and really team well to support the healthy development of a child. Issues like food choices, potty training, behaviors, whether good or bad, socialization, and early education are resolved through mutually beneficial communications. Mixed age groups allow for care for siblings in the same care setting. Having siblings together is not only a convenience for families, but is also supportive of positive sibling relationships. Usually there's very low child turnover in family childcare providers, as they tend to care for children from birth until they are ready for kindergarten and beyond. Small groups add comfort, familiarity. Family childcare providers are found in the same neighborhoods in which parents are seeking care. I mean, the list goes on, and on. Like I said, we could talk for a very long time. But in short, family childcare is a critical component of the economic well-being of families, particularly in rural areas. So there are links that, I think we skipped a slide, but there are links at the bottom of the family childcare slide that really links you to the Head Start performance standards for childcare. Can we go back a slide? I apologize, I think we're ahead here. One more. Okay, this is the link that I was the links that I was talking about really linking to Head Start performance standards. So the next slide now, please. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. So how can this opportunity help support family childcare providers and networks? I think the reason for model development will help answer this question. The partnership model was developed through a collaboration between 2 large federal entities. The first was the Office of Child Care, which administers CCDF, the fund that helps parents pay for child care. Even though this fund currently provides assistance to about 1.5 million infants and toddlers in the US, as well as millions of preschool and school-age children, the office knew that less than 10% of low-income infants and toddlers were enrolled in high-quality environments. The second entity involved in the development of the partnership model was the Office of Head Start. They are also very interested in expanding comprehensive services and education for pregnant women and children ages 6 weeks to 5 years of age. This program focuses on high-quality learning environments for children from low-income families, as well as center-based services to help families move toward self-sufficiency and fulfill their role as parents. So what both offices really wanted to do, they really wanted to build the skills and qualifications of the teacher and provider workforce and support childcare programs in meeting the Head Start performance standards. They wanted to ensure that even though only some of the children in these care settings were enrolled in early Head Start childcare partnership enrollment opportunities, they wanted to ensure that all children benefited from higher quality. Another yet equally important goal, identified by the offices is they wanted to sustain and increase the number of successful small businesses. The only challenge they really had was how to fund it. They knew that additional financial support beyond the subsidy rates provided by CCDF or private pay families would need to come into play, as the current rate structures that we have do not adequately support providers in meeting the health, safety, and developmental needs of children. So next slide, please. So what both offices realized is that if they could combine the child care subsidy, if they could braid and blend Head Start funds with child care funds, they could improve the sustainability of small businesses, and they could provide the necessary resources to providers to meet the Head Start standards. So they looked at best practices from both programs and designed expansion opportunities that focused on children, families, and providers, and have components such as this embedded in the program. So I'm going to name a couple: full day, full year round programs that use research-based curriculum, offering high quality and developmentally appropriate indoor and outdoor learning environments. They wanted comprehensive services that focused on the whole child, including health. They wanted care and learning environments that were staffed by highly skilled caregivers with access to professional development supports. Services that assist families with access to resources and referrals to enhance family health and well-being. As one of the authors of this model repeatedly says, this model is a win-win for all. We are expanding families' access to quality early care and education for their children, while childcare and Head Start programs get to learn from each other and are sustained by an increase in funding. Next slide, please. So before we discuss some of the key service requirements of this grant, we thought it might be helpful to go over just a few definitions for you, because you're going to see these definitions in the funding opportunity announcement, which we call the FOA, and we'll use these terms throughout this webinar. So the first is grantee. Grantee is the organization that files the application and has been granted financial assistance by the federal government. The grantee holds all legal and fiduciary responsibility, and regardless of your network design, what it looks like, that the legal and fiduciary responsibility never leaves the grantee. It always stays. The next description is the delegate, which is also referred to as a subrecipient. And this is an organization or agency to which the grantee has delegated the responsibility of the grant for operating a program and simply passes through the funds to that organization. Now, this option would be appropriate for a grantee, somebody who is submitting the application, who may be contracting with a current family child care network with the organizational structure to support providers in fulfilling the Head Start performance standards. But it's not really a viable option in a model where a grantee is individually contracting with providers. This is a heavy lift and would be, you really need a big organizational structure around you to do this. The next definition is a partner or a contractor who provides goods and services as outlined in a written contract with a grantee or delegate. And that is, again, what would be appropriate for a one-on-one grantee family child care partnership agreement. Comprehensive services means high-quality early education that promotes healthy and cognitive development, offers health supports, provides developmentally appropriate screenings and ongoing assessments, and includes social services for families with assistance from strong community partnerships. So those are just 4 definitions to kind of hold in your mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. Next slide, please. Here we highlight some key service requirements that are specific to family child care and, quite frankly, require a lot of discussion with family child care providers. And you really need to ensure that program supports being developed meet their needs, and that adequate funds are requested in the grant application to meet those needs. So the first is a maximum group size and child staff ratios. In this partnership, one provider alone can care for a maximum of 6 children with no more than 2 children under the age of 2. A provider with an assistant can care for a maximum of 12 children with no more than 4 infant toddlers, with only 2 being under 18 months. So depending upon your state's licensing regulations, this can be a challenge for family child care providers, as often their primary caregiving role is greater than those allowed in the Head Start performance standards. If meeting this standard requires a reduction in group size or hiring additional staff, it is necessary to build those costs into the budget along with additional supports for quality. I think we'd all agree that the importance of a child's attachment to a loving caregiver cannot be overstated. Consistency in caregiving in this FOA, or Funding Opportunity Announcement, is called continuity of care. In this program, an enrolled eligible child cannot be removed from service due to a parent's loss of a child care subsidy. So funds other than a child care subsidy must kick in to ensure the provider's payment remains whole if this happens. Usually this is for a limited time as grantees, staff, social workers work with the family to reestablish the child care subsidy, but your grant really needs to ensure funds for providers to cover those subsidy losses for any child enrolled in the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program. Providers must provide at least 48 weeks a year of child care services, 5 days a week, with hours that meet working parent schedules. And what that means is, it's generally more than an 8-hour day so that parents can work and get to and from care. Evidence-based curriculum and ongoing child assessments are also required in the standards. And what this means for you is that professional development supports, along with on-site coaching to assist providers in meeting the standards, must be built into the budget. So this is really a staffing issue for you. Really think about how you can provide those services. Continuous program improvement is another hallmark of Head Start. And I have to say, you can never accomplish this, the improvements you may need to without reliable data. So reliable data is really key to success here. The grantee must decide which child, family, and staff assessment and evaluation tools will be used to ensure that family child care providers receive helpful and appropriate feedback to support their continuous improvement. Now, I know this sounds like a lot, and quite frankly, it is. But remember, these are goals. It is not expected that all service components are in place day one. They really take time and a lot of thought to accomplish. So be patient with yourselves. But one thing I would start doing now, if you haven't done this already, is start having conversations with family child care providers you would like to include in your network. Your relationship with them, I have to say, is about respect and partnership. You're not swooping in to make them good. You are there to help them meet their quality goals. So find out what their goals are. Select providers who have a positive attitude about professional development. Often you will receive, you'll find these, I should say, on your state's accreditation list or on the upper level of your state's quality rating and improvement system. Next slide, please. Another call. Can you keep hearing that ding? I'm sorry. You can? Let me see if I can figure out how to shut that off. I apologize. I can't figure it out. So hopefully I won't get any more. Family
That's
engagement.
okay.
I apologize. Family engagement is a cornerstone of Head Start services. As you may be able to tell, family needs are never left out of a conversation in Head Start. Family engagement in activities that support their child's learning is expected to be facilitated by the grantee and/or the family child care provider. Many parents really do seek, and they need support to gain the skills and confidence to advocate for their children. One of the ways this is done in Head Start, for example, is through participation on a policy group or a parent group. In Head Start, a formal policy council is required, and partnership parents must hold at least 51% of all seats on that council. The council reviews programmatic and financial data, kind of what curriculums and assessment, what's going on in classrooms. They really review a whole host of data and make recommendations to the board of directors about changes they'd like to see or things that they would like to see happen. This is really a great venue to help parents express their ideas, their concerns, and their desires, not only for the program, but for their children. Another expectation is that grantee staff work with parents to set goals, as well as facilitate access to community resources to assist in meeting those goals. You will have to ensure family engagement specialists or social workers are available to support families and providers to make sure, and I should say, make sure your budget has adequate staffing in this category. Again, this is a big staffing component. Next slide, please. We've really covered the first two checks on this slide already, but there are a couple I would really like to highlight. It is the grantee's role to ensure respectful family child care partnerships and community partnerships are built and maintained, which ultimately will build network capacity in meeting the Head Start performance standards. I cannot stress this point enough about how important it is to build time into your budget to make sure that you have adequate staffing to build and maintain these partnerships. It's just like any other relationship. Supports for each partner need to evolve and ebb and flow as the needs, desires, and interests change over time. So I've included a link here. It's on the third bullet, the third check, that links to federal resources about the development of partnerships and partnership agreements. I think it will be helpful for you and be kind of food for thought as you develop yours. The second key point is the last check that mentions non-federal share. You will be asked for details about this in the budget section of the grant application. For every federal dollar awarded, the grantee has to match it with 25 cents, which is called non-federal share. In the FOA, it explains it this way. It explains it as 20% of the total amount of the project, which includes non-federal share. Well, trust me, that is exactly the same thing as 25% of the federal share. And non-federal share can be received in many, many different forms. It doesn't have to be cash. It can be contributions of materials and supplies. It can be parents' time involved in the classroom activities or participation on policy council or policy groups. It's providers' space that Head Start's not paying for, that they use to serve early Head Start child care partnership children. It can be board of director time, and it can be any other non-federal funds you receive, like state funds or local philanthropic funds, but the funds have to support the grant objectives. So there are many, many ways to get that non-federal share, and I don't want you to stress about it. I just wanted you to be aware of what that meant. And again, I have included a link to the federal resources that will help you fully understand non-federal share and the expectations. Next slide, please. So you may be wondering what a family child care network may look like. Well, the simple answer is there is no one answer. Different communities will approach this in different ways and call it different things. Formation is very individualized and is influenced by the strength within your community and the strength of your partnerships and the challenges that providers face. So we have highlighted a couple of them here, a couple of ones that are used successfully in different parts of the country. The first I'll just mention is the true network model. In this model, each partner, I should say, assumes a significant leadership aspect of the program. One partner may be the grantee, one other may assume the human resources and back office supports. Another partner may know the needs of family child care providers extremely well, so they will lead the professional development, coaching, and mentoring systems. Another may lead the evaluation, but working together, they have to fulfill all the requirements outlined in the Head Start performance standards. The second model is a hub model. And in this model, the grantee fulfills all the roles we just talked about in the network model and really triages the supports to family child care providers so that they ensure that they have the supports and resources needed to achieve high quality learning environments. At the bottom of this slide, you'll find a link to a couple of excellent resources, publications. One that was done by Homegrown on forming family child care networks or hubs that will help you develop your plans. Really, really great resources. I highly recommend that you read them. So I want to stop talking a bit. I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice. And I want you to, we're going to show a quick video from one of the authors of the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships.
It goes without saying that in today's economy, childcare is a real issue for our families, and finding affordable quality childcare, especially for infants and toddlers. So what has happened with the Early Head Start Childcare Partnerships is they have expanded access to high quality care for our families, which is a really important thing out there for families today. Nationwide, about 275 Head Start grantees are partnering with child care providers across this country. And that is leading to higher quality for all of these programs. The programs who partner get access to a whole bunch of supports, such as training, equipment, supplies, etc., that improve the quality of their programs and bring them up to the Early Head Start performance standards, which is a really important thing. So what we're trying to do is to ensure that families have access and that the providers themselves who are in these partnerships have a higher level of income, and they get roughly twice as much money if they're in these partnerships as they would if they were only in the child care subsidy program. So it's a win-win for both of them. Well, the partnerships matter because it expands access to high quality child care for so many families. The partnerships are serving over 30,000 additional infants and toddlers in this country, and more because the other children in the rooms with the Head Start children are getting better quality as well. So for example, a teacher who has taken the training and has access to better equipment and curriculums actually offers that to more children than just those children that are enrolled in this program. So the numbers are much bigger than that, and that's really important for some of our families out there.
We want families to have
So as you can tell, Linda Smith is really the one that wisely gave us our marching orders regarding this partnership. She was really the big impetus for the two departments, the two centers coming together. So now that you've heard a little bit from Adrian and you've heard a little bit more from me about some of the pieces of the partnership, and you've heard Linda Smith's synopsis of the benefits, we're hoping that you can share your thoughts with us. In the chat box, could we're really asking you to reflect on the strengths of the model and the potential benefits for your community. So it would be great if we could have some conversations, some feedback from you about what you think the strengths would be and what are the potential benefits for your community.
Kathy, while folks are taking a moment to think about that question and to share their reflections in the chat box, we do have a question from the group that I'd like to ask you to respond to while folks are taking a minute to do that. The question is that, great. So the question is that do all families in the family child care home need to meet the Head Start income eligibility in order for that provider to participate, or can you have families with mixed incomes?
This is designed for mixed income families. For example, a provider may say, well, I would like to have, I have 2 or 3 families who would qualify for the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, and the others don't need to. So the purpose of this is for those mixed income age groups.
Wonderful, thank you. And just a note to folks joining us today, we will also be including questions from the discussion today in an FAQ that we will keep live on our resource page. So we will provide additional kind of written clarification on the questions that we received today. And again, really want to hear from you in the chat box around sort of how you see Early Head Start Child Care Partnership with Family Child Care supporting your communities, and whether you think it's a good fit for the family child care providers and families that you currently serve. And also encourage you to keep your questions coming.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Natalie. No, I was going to say I can't see any of the responses, so go ahead.
Yep. So I'm going to share a couple of reflections that have come in so far, and then we can, continue. So a reflection from Gabby that this is an opportunity to provide high quality programs to communities and to really leverage more a broader set of resources and academic structures that support families and children. I think that is right on. And so with that, we will kind of keep moving in our presentation. Encourage you to continue thinking and sharing in the chat, and continue to share your questions, and we will address them, throughout the conversation.
Thank you, Natalie. So can we have the next slide, please? Oops, did we skip one? Yeah, there we are. There we are. So, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the actual grant format. For the rest of this presentation is really about the grant format. So many of you may have already read the whole 75 pages of the funding opportunity announcements and instructions, and probably others have not. So we're going to try to hit the right blend of information for you here to support both groups. The grant is organized into these 6 sections. Each section is awarded a point value, and notice that the point values are greater than 100, they're 105 points. Reviewers will rate your responses from 0 up to the maximum point value for each section. And obviously you will want to maximize all the points. You want every single point, because that's how they'll determine who will be funded. You will notice that the first 2 sections equate to almost half of all the points. They are extremely important sections. Not that they all aren't, but those 2 are really, really heavy. The questions that you will be asked are bulleted in the grant application instructions, so please follow the format. Make it easy for reviewers to find the information upon which they will base their scoring. One easy way to do this, for example, is to have subheaders in each section that match the questions asked. Be sure you thoroughly answer each question. There is a page limit of 150 pages, including appendices. Another important thing to note here is that ACF reserves the right to prioritize applications that include opportunity zones. The link on this slide will take you to a page that links you to the description and the list of zones by state. Now those zones are expressed in census tracts, so you'll have to do some digging to look at the census tracts, what area you're proposing to serve. But I would suspect that you're going to find many opportunity zones in your proposed service area. So one of the first, I guess I should say the first section is the community needs and objectives section. This section really wants you to describe the number of children and families to be served and the needs and challenges related to high quality infant, toddler, and 2-year-old care in the communities you are proposing to serve. Reviewers will rate your application based upon the extent to which you present evidence of the need for comprehensive early Head Start Child Care Partnership services. They will also ask for an analysis of the overall existing child care capacity, how many children are on subsidy, if you have knowledge of state subsidy rules and policies, and a bit about the partners committed to the project. If you have a United Way agency, a community action program, or a Head Start program, the community assessment may already exist. So you don't have to start from scratch. You know, many of those organizations have outward facing assessments that is public information. And if they don't, then most of them are would be willing to share their community assessment with you. So don't start from scratch, see what's already there. I am not going to highlight or go over in detail the next 4 sections of this because they so closely intertwine with the Head Start management wheel that Carol is going to talk about in a minute, and how important it is to weave those throughout your application, that I'm just going to leave those for her to discuss. But before I turn it over to her, I do want to address the budget section. This last section asks you to describe your budget in detail in accordance with very specific budget categories that are described in the funding opportunity announcement. The budget descriptors and requirements are highlighted throughout the FOA, but be sure to really read and scrutinize the information on pages 40 through 46 in their entirety, as they really contain some important information about how you have to present your budget. It asks that you prepare an annualized budget as well as a startup budget. Now, the startup budget, what goes in there is anything that supports the grantee, the provider, or a network, what you would need to get ready to implement services. You have a 1-year time frame to expend those funds, and you only include the one-time expenses. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. If in your environmental scans you see that a provider may need a fence to ensure safety of children, or may need some minor modifications to their learning environments, or may need curriculum kits and the materials that accompany that, those would go in a startup budget because those are things that you need to start program implementation. All other ongoing expenses should be in your annual operational budget, as these are expenses you'll have year over year. So just pay particular attention to those one-time versus ongoing. Additionally, in this section, you will need to detail your plan for leveraging child care funds and how you will provide continuity of services for children and ensure sufficient resources for your family child care partners. So be very specific about that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carol. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope there have been a few tips and points throughout this that will help you as you prepare your application. Carol?
Thanks, Kathy.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hello and welcome. Hey, Natalie. Did you want to say anything, Natalie, to transition, or are you good to go? We're good to go.
Go ahead. Let's go ahead. We have a couple of questions, but I'll let you get started, Carol, and maybe we can take a quick break during your section to answer a couple of them.
Sure, sounds good. So I need to go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go, the management wheel. Hello and welcome. I'm Carol Kynes, and with Kathy, I also have experience with Head Start programming and grant writing. But my little secret that I'm only sharing with folks on this webinar is that before Head Start, I was actually the director for a small family childcare network in Madison, Wisconsin. So hopefully that, along with my work with providers and Kathy's extensive experience with the integration of family childcare providers into Head Start, Kathy and I can provide you with a foundation to build a winning grant proposal. So to make sure I include all the information I want to share with you, you may notice that I am reading from my notes, and I apologize for that, but hopefully that will provide you with better content. Also, I'll use the generic word for network for all organizations. I hope that's okay with everyone, as we were not aware of the number and the amazing diversity of the audience until recently. So please excuse any of my references if they don't apply to you or your organization. So, okay, let's get down in the weeds together. This is the section that really drills down into the specific requirements of the grants. Some of the requirements Kathy has already mentioned, and I'll try to make sure that we don't duplicate our information. But for that reason, and as Kathy mentioned, I'm going to start with this wonderful Head Start management wheel. The colors aren't great, but the information is wonderful. So as I mentioned, or as Kathy mentioned, it includes all the key concepts of the Head Start performance standards. Understanding the intent of the parts of this graphic will allow for you to integrate the following key concepts into your grant narrative. Notice that leadership and governance, the first key concept, is the outside ring on the wheel. This is because strong relationship-based leadership and governance is required to make everything in your Head Start program work. And that includes the program planning, management, and oversight. Those are the three areas that are next in the inner yellow circle. As you write the grant, you'll want to weave these two management structures throughout the narrative of all the 6 criteria sections that Kathy mentioned in the previous slide. Inside the yellow circle are the blue pie pieces that represent systems necessary to create and implement responsive and effective protocols and services. You can use this wheel really effectively. What I do is I just put it next to me when I'm writing a grant, and I just check off the parts on the wheel as you weave in those sections into your application narrative. If you move to the inner dark blue circle, this represents all the normal sort of component areas in Head Start. These component areas must all be included in one or more of the narrative criteria sections of your grant proposal. You can see that these component areas include education, family and community engagement, health, mental health, and something called ERSIA. ERSIA is an acronym, and the E in the acronym basically means eligibility requirements. So you have to have a system for determining the family's income to make sure it meets the Head Start eligibility requirements. The R is the recruitment strategies that you use and the plans. S is for your selection to really think about how you can select the most vulnerable children in your community. E is for enrollment in your plan to ensure that you're always fully enrolled in this grant. So when you decide on the number that you want to go for in this grant, and it's a minimum enrollment of 72 children, you need to maintain that enrollment throughout the grant period, which is 5 years. And the A means attendance, the children who are attending on a regular basis. So ERSIA is an acronym that in general really means strategies for children enrollment and attendance. And you'll see that acronym a lot in the FOA as well. All of these concentric circles surround a white circle in the center, and that represents why we do what we do. And again, it's nice to have that next to you when you're writing a grant and you're really tired, and then you look into the center of the circle and you say, okay, that's right. We're going to achieve quality outcomes for children and families, and we're going to positively impact generational poverty. Maybe not me personally, but hopefully the grant will do that for us. The reason for showing you the management wheel is also that it provides an overview for the information you can expect to see in the final slides of this webinar. These final slides were developed to provide the program detail that will help prepare you for both writing a Head Start grant proposal and, of course, implementing the grant when you win. Just a note that the links at the bottom of the slides are duplicated in the Homegrown's resource library. And I believe, Nellie, you'll be able to access that on the Homegrown website. And all you'll have to do then is find it in the resource library and then click on the link, and it'll take you, for example, this link will take you directly to the Early Childhood Knowledge and Learning Center website, where once you're there, you can then click on any slice of the ring or the graphic, and it'll take you directly to a description of the Head Start requirements for that area. So it's really helpful, even for old-time Head Start grant writers, to remember what exactly that Head Start requirement is. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm gonna not be reading from my slides to you, but rather just discussing the highlights and the main concepts. So if you have any questions, please put them in a chat box, and we'll be able to discuss anything that you want me to go over as we go through this. Okay. Let's look at the next slide. Leadership and governance. Remember, that was the first ring. Okay, but before I begin with leadership, just a quick note about the format of these slides. You'll notice on the right side of the slide, of each slide, there's a box. And in those boxes are readiness questions that Kathy and I pose to you to think about how you can be ready to write this grant and what it will take for you to really implement this grant. So that's the intent of those questions, and also for you, as we go through these slides, to ask questions that might be more relevant to your proposal. Now, about leadership and governance. Remember, leadership and governance on the outside of the wheel, and leadership, as we describe it, is really the bedrock of effective management. We know from research that without effective management and leadership, there is often disarray and failure for your program. And you've probably known organizations that have failed for just that reason. You will be describing in the FOA your networks or organizations or family childcare leadership capacity throughout this grant proposal, but primarily you'll talk about it in the staff section, where you will need to add an organizational, you will need to add an organizational chart in the appendix. And that has to be described consistently through your narrative, especially in the staff section. So you want the names in your organizational chart to appear as the same name in your staffing section. So just make sure you have it all figured out before you start writing. Then in the staff section, you'll also describe the job descriptions and attributes of successful candidates, or if you're elevating a current employee to a new job in the grant, what their qualifications look like. Leadership is how you effectively drive the governance piece of this. Leadership staff from your network should provide clear guidance and reports with information on implementation of the grant process to the governance bodies. But leadership, it's really important that you describe a leadership culture in your grant. So thinking about leadership as being transparent, humble, using reflective practices to support staff, and how you assimilate ideas and concerns from your partners. So don't miss this chance to talk about what are the strengths in the culture of your organization. Okay, switching over to governance now. Governance is important in the whole idea of family-based programming that is described through the Head Start program performance standards. There must be a board of directors that you either have currently or you would develop. And the board has to have members that are reflective of families who you are serving and have competencies that are required by Head Start in areas such as education, fiscal, and human resources. Further, your board of directors must communicate with your parent board, the policy council, and agree, that Kathy talked a little bit about the policy council already, and agree on programmatic goals. Both governance entities must have regular meetings, bylaws, and provide approvals for specific actions of your network. All of the grant requests to Head Start must have approvals from both of these governance entities. But if you don't have a parent group yet, you're not a Head Start program, you can forego that requirement, but you will need to still have a signed document demonstrating the approval of your grant included in the submission from your board of directors. Okay, so take a look at those readiness questions and think about how you might do some of these things within your organization. Okay, next slide, please. So Kathy quickly mentioned data when she was talking about the community needs assessment. But data and evaluation is a key to successful grant writing in 2020 for any Head Start program. A pitfall in reporting data for some programs, and grant reviewers will look for this, is because there's a lack of a system that continually verifies the data being entered into your database or being used. So you'll want to make sure that you have a system for verifying data. An example might be that the person in your organization who enters data put in 100 children that a provider has, instead of putting in 1.00 for the one child that the provider has. So you can see how that can really mess things up, and you might not see it unless you check on that validity as you are looking at your data and you're evaluating it. It's important to describe in the narrative a process for program improvement as well that utilizes data. Program improvement strategies using data should be included in section 2 of the grant criteria that talks about achieving child outcomes, and section 5, planning and implementation. And I'll be discussing program improvement strategies again a little later in this presentation. Programs may already be gathering quantitative data and have experience in using research-based assessments or screenings to measure the important indicators of your success. If you don't have that already, you should think about also including qualitative data, as this more informal data can be gathered through surveys or discussion groups and can actually provide some really great descriptive information to more fully inform your evaluation process. Adding data about your network throughout your narrative demonstrates a strong, well thought out proposal, that you base this proposal on things that are happening within your organization and you know you can make happen. But very importantly, you need to convince the reader of your ability to implement a Head Start program. If you don't have a lot of data, look around your program. You may actually have some. For example, if you are screening children for developmental delays, you could use the Ages and Stages screener. This is data, and you may be able to track information about children in your program to use this in your proposal. This will demonstrate your experience in gathering and aggregating data. And of course, you may have used this information in the past to improve services through either changes in the way you do things or by building on best practices that you already have in place. You will want to investigate various assessment and screening data tools, and perhaps work with a researcher from either one of your community partners, your state or university, who's willing to support your use of data gathering and aggregation in the future when you would receive the grant. Remember, as Kathy mentioned, this is a 5-year grant that then can be reauthorized for another 5 years. But in the initial 5 years, everything does not need to be up and running in your first year. For example, if you're doing teacher provider assessments and using that data, it's more realistic to have those assessments done in year 2 or 3 after you have training occurring. Again, take a look at those readiness questions. Hopefully they're a little bit helpful to you so that you can really drill down as to how to implement this program and what to include in your grant application.
Carol, would you like to take a couple of quick questions from the chat before we move on to the next slide? So the question is just being real specific about what ages the children in this program can be. So the 72 minimum enrollment, what is the age group for those children? Do you want to take that quickly before we keep moving?
Sure, I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but for family childcare providers, you can take children all the way, actually from birth through age 4. So your children can be enrolled with you through the age of 4, and you can make a case for continuing to serve a 4-year-old if it might be in their benefit because they might have a disability, or right at their birth date, maybe you have a cohort of children that are all going to transition into a pre-K program. So you can also make a case for holding on to that child for a couple more months, but generally it's 0 to 4.
Great, thank you.
And the 72 number refers to the entire grant. So the entire grant minimum that you write for is 72 children.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
I also saw that someone asked about the E and ERCIA. And again, that's eligibility. And Head Start eligibility is based on the federal poverty guidelines, but then we also include another 30% of allowing children up to another federal guideline. So basically it's some of your children need to be, it's a little messy or mushy here. Most of your children need to meet the federal guidelines or have a disability or be in foster care. There's a lot. Or we can also opt into a 10% over income or a 35. It's really messy, but that might be something that we could discuss in one of those F&Q sessions that you're talking about having after this session, because it's really kind of a messy thing to talk about. Okay, next slide, please. Fiscal management. Now, Kathy talked about this a little bit, but in general, what I want to say about this is you need to describe in your grant that you have a strong fiscal system that will support your operations. You want to make sure that you talk about safeguarding the federal funds, adhering to generally accepted accounting practices and procurement processes and procedures that require these multiple approvals. Safeguarding is a word that's often used in Head Start circles, and it really means that you need to follow general accounting practices and to have a person with a CPA or plan on adding a person with significant accounting experience and background to your board of directors, who would then be able to review your budgets and your revenue and expenses for the program. It's perfectly acceptable, however, and the Office of Head Start will not penalize you for not having any of these Head Start requirements in place. For example, you don't have a member with a CPA on your board. You're only penalized in the grant if you don't talk about a realistic plan to meet these requirements. So the Office of Head Start understands that some organizations that are awarded these grants need additional support to meet Head Start performance standards. So it's evidenced by the fact, this is really evidenced by the fact that when you do receive the grant, a requirement in the first couple months is that you all attend an information center, information training on the requirements of the Federal Office of Management and Budget. And especially if you don't have this level of fiscal management currently, what you would do in the grant is you would just provide a statement in your grant that you intend to have all fiscal management staff attend a training that includes the Office of Management and Budget requirements. And then, you know, develop a fiscal manual, or maybe you have a fiscal manual, so you would talk about updating that manual. So that the manual is then inclusive of those OMB requirements. Your network may already have an annual audit, but unfortunately, this is another thing that you will have to do if you become a Head Start grantee. You will have to have an annual audit, and that you will have to report that to the federal government. So remember, you also need to have a plan to meet the requirements of the non-federal match that Kathy mentioned. And I'm gonna go on because I'm using up time here. Is that okay, Natalie? So we'll just quickly, so we get through this. So I'm going to talk next, if we could, oh, you already did. Thank you, Karen. Facilities and learning environments. This slide focuses on the basics that some networks already have in place, supporting your providers to meet licensing, safety, and health regulations, and to provide children with developmentally appropriate learning environments. Most of the providers you probably have selected will be in good standing with licensing. However, you will want to create a standard of quality and describe that in your narrative about how you're going to help providers reach those standards. The Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program will require you to have an evidence-based curriculum. And Adrienne talked about that, how she had a different curriculum to begin with, and now she uses creative curriculum. And she also had, which is amazing, she actually had an assessment tool that she was using with her kids, which not many folks have. And she decided to use the Teaching Strategies Gold assessment tool that goes with creative curriculum. And you'll need to have both of those pieces, and you'll need to describe what curriculums you're going to use, and then how you're going to use them to make sure that you're looking at children's growth and development throughout the program year. The thing to remind you about too is what you write in this grant is really important, and you should research it and really be thoughtful about it. But once you do receive the grant, you can make changes in your proposal, even as far as changing the curriculum you want to use. So don't get too wrapped up. Just put out what you think is the best and will show off your organization in the best way, and utilize all of the resources that Natalie and Karen have put together in their resource library. So that's just how you can get to be writing a winning grant. But let's quickly talk about facilities, the second piece of this section. You also need to include that and how you will ensure children have access to a clean and safe environment. In this grant, you need to know that you are not to talk about COVID, which is like crazy because it's so much a part of all of our lives now. But try to set that aside and don't talk about it in your application. The only thing that I would suggest is that you could talk about it under creating a safe and healthy environment and talk about emergency procedures. And you can include in there just a short sentence about how your emergency procedures will relate to keeping children safe from the virus. But otherwise, don't mention it. It's not to be mentioned in the grant. Okay. Let's quickly go to the next slide. Training and professional development. Training and professional development is able to be integrated into many of the criteria sections of the grant, including fiscal, and as well, surprisingly, your responses to the training and technical assistance section. But you're going to have to reference, because some of these things like training and professional development occur in questions. It should be referenced in questions throughout the grant. And you do that by cross-referencing. Cross-referencing can save you many pages. And you want to use it so that, for example, in one of the questions, you do want to make sure that they understand you're going to use professional development, but the way you really describe it is in a different section. So you would write a quick sentence and say, and then put in parentheses, C section, whatever, where you're cross-referencing. Don't repeat yourself if you can avoid it. I know 150 pages sounds a lot, but remember, some of those pages are your appendices. Questions will occur in the past performance sections as well. And that's a good opportunity for you to talk about all of your successes of your program in the past and how they will help you be successful in implementing this grant application. Then, so for example, if you were, so one of the things that might have occurred is you might have low staff turnover. Well, if you have low staff turnover, talk about why that is and how you're going to be using that in this grant to make sure that there is lower turnover, because low staff turnover is the indication of a very high quality program. When you're discussing improved training and technical assistance, it's also important to include a description of a coaching model. If you don't have one, you're going to want to include that in your grant. And you can leverage that coaching model in the training piece of this grant application. The grant will also require you to describe how you will use the federal training and technical assistance dollars that are available to you. Be sure you use careful consideration and think about the training needs that you will ultimately assign to a federal team to come in and do training with your network. So you need to think about that carefully. All right, we were going to take a minute to talk about the readiness question that's highlighted here, but I really think we need to move on as I have quite a few slides. And maybe what we can do, Natalie, is take some of these questions and again, put them in an F&Q section, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
let's do that. And I apologize. You know, Head Start just has so much, as Kathy was mentioning. It just, it's such a comprehensive and exhaustive program. But it does a lot and will support your programming in a way that's really, really positive. So ongoing monitoring and continuous improvement. This slide emphasizes the importance of having an ongoing monitoring plan to ensure all of your selected homes, family childcare homes, are meeting Head Start and state requirements, and that you're providing those supports that they need. When we talk about building a strong monitoring and continuous improvement system, one of the key factors driving that success is the hiring of qualified, experienced coaches. Again, I talked about that before, but coaches can make the difference in making or breaking your program. Having high quality coaches that are really able to mesh with your providers, mesh with your staff, and create and help your providers work to provide new experiences for children based on the assessments that they're seeing in their childcare curriculum assessment piece. Just as a rule of thumb, when you are thinking about, if you don't have coaches already in your program, a rule of thumb is generally that you want to have about 4 to 5 providers per coach, so that your coach is able to go to at least once a week or once every other week to spend more time with each one of your providers. So do your own research, choose a certification for your coaches, price it out, add it to your budget, and figure out how many coaches you can afford. But think about 4 to 5 coaches, 4 to 5 providers per coach. When possible, again, show and take your current practices that you have in place, reimagine them, and fit them into the constructs of Head Start. But also, here's a cautionary note. I'm not suggesting that you create a process that doesn't make sense. It's better to talk about how you use experts, community partners, or others to support integrating new management systems that will support successful implementation of the grant requirements. Okay, and we're not going to look at the readiness questions, but again, we can look at those during those Q&A sessions. Record keeping and reporting. You may already know that, or you may have systems for reporting, but you really need to prioritize your thinking about what procedures need to be developed to meet the Head Start reporting requirements. So just think about that, look at those readiness questions, and again, we'll just talk about that in those question and answer sessions. Just a well thought out reporting schedule really is a valuable tool to create and attach it in your appendices. Again, it doesn't need to be your A+ final plan, but the A+ plan can be created once you receive the grant. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide, human resources. And my 2 big things to think about there are you need to think about what your requirements are going to be for your family childcare providers. You know, or you might not know, but Head Start requires a minimum of a family childcare CDA for all providers, and the staff for your network will need to meet all the requirements in Head Start. And again, there are links in that resource library that Homegrown has developed. The important thing to think about and include, because you're also going to need to put together a provider agreement, and in that provider agreement, and each one will be different because some providers will be highly qualified, others not. It's important to include standards of conduct, and you want to also include what your standard of conduct is in your appendices. This is just something to keep in your back pocket about implementation, and also in how you're writing, when you're writing the grant, that background checks on family childcare providers and anyone who's in the home and on your staff need to occur before any enrollment can happen. And one of the biggest things in this grant is you have to show that you can get full enrollment of the program within 12 months. So if you're going to do that, you have to get everyone's background checks done. And I think most states have that now as a requirement of licensing, but you want to make sure you have those documents in hand. Family child qualifications are going to take more time, maybe 18 months to 2 years. So that's not your most important thing. Your most important thing is to get those background checks done and make sure that you can be able to have a system enrollment that is really speedy and gets you full enrollment within 12 months. Okay, I'm gonna just skip through the last slide 23, 24 through 26. Just kind of if you can quickly click through those, Karen. Self-assessment, again, looking at those readiness questions. Look at the next slide. Technology. Technology is where you want to really build into your startup grant additional databases, computers, iPads. for your classrooms or your family childcare providers. Can you go to the next one? Communication. You want to weave communication throughout the entire grant. It's important that providers are communicated in a respectful manner. If you lose your providers, it takes a long time to find another great provider to replace them. Next one. Transportation is not required or mandated in this grant, but you want to make sure that you look at if providers are transporting kids, what are those risks, and set up protocols for that. So this is the last slide. And we made it. I was a little worried about timing here. Thanks to all of you for sticking with us through this information. We hope that it didn't just provide information for your grant proposal, but we're hoping it inspires you to join with Head Start programs and Homegrown to improve and increase the access to quality childcare for all families. We want to thank Homegrown for their vision in understanding the impact of networks and family childcare grants. Kathy and I have seen firsthand how that expands family childcare. It's just amazing what this grant can do. So again, thank you, Homegrown, and I'll turn it back to Natalie.
Thank you so much, Carol and Kathy. Head Start is incredibly rich, and it makes sharing information about Head Start challenging in a short amount of time. So thank you both for packing so much into this discussion. I want to leave you all with a couple of things that are sort of coming up next and some resources. So here is a link, and I've shared it in the chat, for the resource library that is located on our website. In that resource library, there is an open space for you to enter questions that you have. We also really invite you to share with us your needs or ways that we can support you, like what documents are you looking for, what questions do you have that we can help answer. So please use the information library and tell us what's missing from the library, what else you might like to see there. And then we have two kind of technical assistance calls that we have scheduled. So in addition to next week, we have another webinar really focused on existing grantees who want to add family childcare to their existing grants or expansion grants. We will be holding a series of technical assistance calls. The next two are scheduled. On August 13th, we will really look at kind of partner engagement, both how to engage family child care providers in your grant proposal and in your hopefully funded program. And we'll also talk about how to think about non-federal match and engaging funders and others to support your program, you know, and really want to prioritize that, because those are really important conversations that need to happen early in your grant writing process. So you can look for that on August 13th. And then on August 25th, we will really dive into some program models, and we'll include some existing grantees who have really, you know, done this work before and have refined their models, and sort of share how they're thinking about you know, integrating family childcare into their early Head Start childcare partnerships. So you will not want to miss that. Everybody that participated today will get a follow-up email. You will receive a recording of this webinar, and all the materials shared today will be posted on the website, including written answers to any questions that we were not able to address during our discussion today. With that, I just want to say a final big thank you to Carol and Kathy, and to Karen for getting all of our technology and everything organized for today. We really appreciate you spending this time with us, and look forward to seeing you at one of these next opportunities. Thank you so much.